Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today is Bryan and myself, and we are going to be discussing some relevant research roundup of some studies that has come out in the last couple months. But before we dig into this, Bryan, what's going on?
What is going on? I am in the middle of my strength cycle now. I'm on week 2, so that's pretty sweet. I decided recently that it would be really cool if I can hit a 405 single on back squat and have it be as easy as, feeling like an RPE 6 or 7, which is kind of what I've been working up to as my top single each week. So I started at 365 last week, and I think I mentioned on the podcast that it moved really well, and I was really excited about that. So then I did 370 this week. That went well. And 7 more weeks from now, hopefully, I hit 405, and it moves just as well as 365 does. And that would be pretty cool. So that would be like right around the amount of time that I think is a good amount of time to spend on a strength cycle. One that I think will keep me engaged and has kind of a goal at the end, like, hey, let's make this 405 single feel really easy. And so far, so good. I really enjoy training 3 days a week, which has been interesting, but I'm just like I'm so excited to train each session, which is new for me. Like training 5 days a week, there would definitely be sessions where I'd be like, oh, I have to train again. Like I kind of don't really want to. But now it's like having these rest days in between. I get excited about training during the rest day, and then I wake up the next day like kind of giddy to train again. So that's been kind of unique and cool. And I have a bunch of other updates too, but let me kick it back to you. Let's talk about what's going on with you a little bit.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the past 2 weeks I have only trained 3 days per week as well. And that is like, I don't like training at that frequency. It's just like, it just bothers me. I have no idea why. But I'm actually in this like weird kind of, for the first time in my life, I guess, like my desire to work is like greater than my desire to go lift weights. So there will be times where I'm like, fuck, I need to go to the gym today. Like it's supposed to be a training day, but I really just want to keep sitting here working. So it often ends up getting pushed to like the end of the night. So like Mondays are a big work day for me. So I'm at the gym from like 8 to 10 p.m. basically. Um, but I think it's just I got a lot of exciting things going on. Like I'm making a large change to my business model for my coaching, and I'm building like a very robust education course to run and coincide with like my nutrition and lifestyle coaching that I do. So that is just like taking a lot of my effort and energy. It's a big project. I'm bringing on help, hiring like an assistant to help me just do some clicking, right? As my girlfriend Jenny would say, there's just so many clicks to do a lot of things. So paying for someone to help do some clicking and putting some stuff together. I'm going to be teaching like a course, like a masterclass webinar for other coaches. That will be next month. So that's going to be pretty cool. I have that outline. I just finished writing that, and now I'm moving into slides and stuff. So that's going to be on like creating a successful environment for facilitating fat loss, right? So I'll talk more on that as we're kind of leading into it, but that's like another big project because I really want to make sure that that's super, super valuable. So I'm just, Aaron, the bro who wants to lift weights, has taken a little bit of a backseat to like Aaron, the CEO, who's scaling a business and needs more time in the day to get things done. So that would kind of be my update there. A little bit of an update on my gut protocol. Things are going well. I have identified. So what I would do is like, okay, I'm like, I know, these meals I'm perfectly fine. I know some of my stomach kind of discomfort and gas will set in around like this time of day. So it's not my breakfast. It's not that final meal. And I've identified it down to it's either oats or ground flaxseed that has been causing me some like gas and digestive issues. And it's really interesting because they're both foods that I had, that I have eaten extensively in my life. So it's kind of interesting that they would start presenting issues now. But I mean, the thing is, when you're comparing digestion, from like years ago, right? So, back when we lived in San Diego, whatever, this is before all my travel, all those bacterial infections, right? Which will change the balance of the gut microbiome. And now I might have concentrations of certain bacteria that are higher and might feed off of certain fibers, that are in either oats or flaxseed. So I mean, it really is a moving, a shifting landscape, I guess I should say, with the environment of your intestines and stuff like that. So removing those temporarily. I think I am going to get a GI map too, which is like a pretty I confused robust and intensive. Let's go with robust. Robust test, monitoring like some of your bacteria in your intestine and in imbalances and stuff like that. So I just like with anything, right? I love the data, so I'm already here doing it. I might as well see what kind of data, and you can order those through like some registered dietitians or companies and stuff like that. I believe they're around like $350 normally, which I think is well worth money. I'm also going to get some labs done. My coach asked for some labs because he is basically I'm just staying a lot leaner than he thought would be kind of possible with what we're doing. So he's like, I just want to make sure that like sex hormone binding globulin and testosterone isn't in like the dumps. It has been really kind of interesting for me too, as calories continue to increase. We haven't increased them in a few weeks because the gut protocol is the priority. And obviously when you have problems digesting food, adding more food into that equation doesn't help things. But on my training days, I'm at like 3,100. And then on my rest days, I'm in like the 2,700 territory. So from a hunger standpoint, I'm perfectly fine as long as I'm eating consistently. I don't have any hunger issues. But just to get some data and see, right? Make sure that my levels have returned to what is normal for me. And maybe we've found that my body just responds better with a more moderate carbohydrate and moderate fat approach. Previously we've always gone really high carbohydrate and low fat. So maybe just finding out something.
Wouldn't that be a plot twist? The coach that has always been prescribing all the carbs. Yeah, no, but obviously, I mean, it always comes down to the individual and what they need. And like, as a good coach, you know that too. So it's like carbs are the starting place. But then, over many years, you guys kind of whittled it down and may have determined something new, which is cool.
Yeah, so it could be pretty cool. And I think also it is relative to the type of fats I'm ingesting. So like, while I would love to have some avocado, we're going a low FODMAP approach for, FODMAPs are fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, oligosaccharides, and I forget what the S stands for. Or no, it's the P, polysaccharides, I think. Okay, so anyway, it's a bunch of different types of carbohydrate that are more or less prone for fermentation in your intestines. So while you are trying to decrease the amount of fermentation and byproduct of gas and methane and stuff like that gets produced, these are foods that you can temporarily remove, big keyword temporarily, while you address some of the other things. So avocado is a FODMAP, so I haven't been having it, but I mean, it's an overwhelming majority of like extra virgin olive oil, like really, really quality olive oil. I split my nuts between walnuts and Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts are high in selenium. Walnuts are high in omega-3s. They're also high in omega-6s, but more nutrient out of there. And then I was doing chia seeds and flaxseed. I will only do chia seeds now, and then I'm also doing more dark chocolate. Like I'll buy the darkest dark chocolate I can find. Like I think I'm getting like a 93 or something like that.
That's bitter.
I like the flavor, but they're super high in flavonols comparatively, right? And then you get like less sugar and those sorts of things. And then I also recently started adding unsweetened cocoa powder to my pre or post workout meal. Again, higher in flavonols and just getting more antioxidants. So my fat sources are like really, really nutrient dense fat sources. Yeah. It's not like I'm having fucking donuts or
well, there's carbs with that. You need you can't have sugar with that, right? You can't have the saccharides.
I would want to avoid a lot of that. Yeah. So it is like a very, very high quality fat sources that I am putting into my diet.
Cool. Are you taking any fish oil pills or anything like that, or you just feel like you're getting enough?
I ran out. I've actually recently in like the summertime started switching over to like some of the oils, so you can do like cod liver oil. I forget the name of the company that makes it. It's like a green bottle with a yellow top that you'll find in like Sprouts or other like health food stores. I'm sure Whole Foods has it too. The cod liver oil is interesting because it also has like higher amounts of vitamin A and vitamin D. It is a little bit lower on the amount of fish oil, but like, marginally, you're still getting like I think like a gram of fish oils or something like that, omega threes. Or there's another one, excuse me, that's like a pure omega 3 type thing. But last time I checked on my chronometer, I was getting like 6 grams of omega 3s per day, because of like the walnuts and the Brazil nuts and the types of fats I'm doing. So I definitely do not need to be supplementing it right now because my fats are just higher and I'm filling them with like targeted, polyunsaturated fat sources.
Cool. Awesome. Let's see. So what else with me? So my body weight is finally trending back down again after I've gotten my life back under control.
I had a note and I was like, got to make sure to ask Bryan about where his body weight's at after.
So at the worst, the very worst, I had a 194.6 weigh in the morning. But then it was the next day that I kind of cleaned things up. This was last week. And it dropped down to 191 the next day and then 190 the day after that. And that's kind of where I've been stable, mostly within a pound of 190 up or down. So that's me hanging out at like 3,000 to 3,500 calories is pretty stable at 190. But I had to write myself an email to get my nutrition back on track. And it said, eat like a fucking adult. That's what the email to myself said. And so for the first like day or two, every time I like almost went to like the Halloween candy or whatever and got into it, I was like, look at my phone, remember that email I sent myself, and I would reference that, and that got me out of my like 3-week funk. So
something I really like to do, and I recommend this for clients often, so I think it would be great to bring up on the podcast, is I'll get like obviously not a Sharpie, like a whiteboard marker, and I'll write my goals like on the mirror. So then while I'm like brushing my teeth, like you see that twice a day, you have to look at it. First thing in the morning when you go to bed. So that's another one that I really like to use.
That's pretty solid. Yeah.
I'm sure Kim would appreciate you scribing "eat like a fucking adult." Big on the bathroom mirror.
Luckily, we each have our own sink and our own mirror, so I can just be like, "Yo, my area, your area," So anyway, it feels good. I feel better being back on track, and I also noticed that like my skin was starting to get bad. I think from getting like all the bad excess shit that my body didn't want was like coming out on my face. So I'd get like a little bit of acne, and I was like, what is going on right now?
You could have just been like inadvertently eating foods high in histamines, like from acutely changing things too. That would do it.
This was, I'm saying, when I was eating poorly, and already like having cleaned my eating up for like a week now, it's starting to clean my face up too, because there's just less like excess to excrete, I guess. My vasectomy, I'm still not like 100%. I'm able to lift and walk fine, but I can't like run or jump. So it's like 2.5 weeks now, and I still can't do that, which sucks. I don't know at what point I should like check in with the doctor and be like, hey dude, like still not good. But
I would have called by now. And that's saying a lot for me, because I do not like calling people on the phone that I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, he said it could be up to 4 weeks. Like, they always say, like, these things, like, everyone hits everyone different. Like, it's usually 5 to 7 days, but it could be, like, 4 weeks. So, anyways, I don't know. I'm probably going to do it at some point this week. And the other thing I was going to update on was I am considering getting, like, an open gym drop-in membership to like a local CrossFit gym, just to have a place to go and use bumper plates throughout this strength cycle. And I don't know, it's just like something about loading up the 100-pound plates onto my barbell so that I can back squat in a power rack that isn't even a power rack. Like, it has the pins that catch the bar if you fail are maybe 6 inches long. And so I don't know. I think I would feel more confident, and it would be kind of cool to like be lifting heavier weights around people instead of like in my basement by myself. And the 100-pound plate thing, like literally loading a 100-pound plate onto the bar and off every time is a hassle. So anyway, that's something I'm considering. I emailed CrossFit Sanitas because they have open gym between 9 and 10:30 in the mornings. So we'll see what comes of that. But I might be doing like strength work once or twice a week there.
Yeah, I think that could be a pretty cool idea. I mean, honestly, just the safety thing I get, and for pushing yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like it's hypertrophy's different, in my opinion, from strength because of like the safety aspect, right? And I don't know, just like an exertion, like a CNS type of like you're giving it your all type of deal. It's just different to me, and I feel like I would sandbag, if I'm trying to squat in my basement by myself type of thing, as if I'm in,
Yeah.
public, and I feel safer like bailing a squat out of like a CrossFit style rack as opposed to like a power rack or something like that.
Yeah. Totally. I think of hypertrophy training when done like very acutely with the focus on the specific muscle doing the work. I think of that almost like an introverted activity. Like you're like, just stay out of my zone. Let me focus on my teeny muscle here in my quad that's, flexing my hip and extending my knee. And let me just focus on that one muscle. So stay out of my zone. And I feel like with the strength stuff and with CrossFit and with other performance pursuits, there's almost like an energy that helps the cause to amp you up, but that same energy would be a drawback in hypertrophy. Like you're like, no, don't speed me up or tell me to get it, bro. Like, let me just focus on my shit.
I agree 100% with that. Yeah, it's I don't know, two different mental scenarios. I would prefer like hypertrophy style. Like if the gym was empty, I think it would be better for me. But if I was like doing CrossFit and the gym was empty and it was myself, like I wouldn't have finished half of my workouts because I'm like, fuck this, I'm going home.
Dude, the amount of times, maybe like twice, that I've seen the eyes roll back in your head and you're like still doing deadlifts. And it's just like, oh, this is not good.
No, I'm so glad those days are over.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Anything else? Any updates? Any other updates from you?
We're good, man. Let's move on. Let's talk about some research. This is
Let's do it.
Yeah, this is a super cool idea that I had. I totally stole it from the Stronger by Science guys because they have a research roundup. But I think it's going to be a cool segment in our podcast because we do talk about research a lot, but we very rarely have like segments where we actually like talk about specific studies and give opinions on them. We did this, I think, back in like episode 4 or 5 or 6, something like that, where we talked about rest periods. We cited studies for that one, and we had another one, I think, on rep ranges or something like that. But I can't remember exactly what it was. But this will be maybe a feature that we can do once a month where we get some of the more recent studies that came out and talk about them briefly, and move on. So we have 3 topics today, but one of the topics I want to spend more time on, and there's like 3 studies I want to talk about on this topic, right? So the first one I think is just interesting. It's the recent Pontzer study where they discussed energy expenditure through the human life course. And a lot of you guys have probably seen this because CNN posted about it in New York Times, and like it's been plastered everywhere, basically saying that metabolism does not slow down as you get older until you get to approximately 60 years old, and then it does kind of slow down. But there was always this belief like it would be like, what was it, every 10 years your metabolism slows, which was like such bullshit. So this study was actually really cool, and I know you're probably familiar with it. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I've experienced in my clients, and I am, as I age, right, I get some clients that are a little bit more a little older, and I get clients, in their early 50s, late 40s and stuff like that. And I'll have guys who are, they're like 48, 49 years old, and their testosterone's in the 700s and shit. And I'm like, fuck, why can't mine do that? And we have very little trouble, dropping fat and building muscle and stuff. And it's one of those things that like we want to believe that it slows because it confirms our bias that it's like not my actions of why I don't look how I used to when I was 25, now that I'm like 35, because we can, externalize that and it's not me, it's, my metabolism, my physiology is slowing down. But I mean, what we can, blatantly see, it's lifestyle and habits.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned testosterone, but obviously testosterone is not part of metabolic rate. It's like a corollary, I guess, of sorts.
Yeah.
So that is cool that there are clients in their 40s and 50s with 700 testosterone, because I'm like half that, so that's wild. But But yeah, basically it takes away the excuse of like, hey, my metabolism is slowing down, so I'm gaining fat. It's like if you're gaining fat between up until you're 60 years old, it's because you're either less active, you're not maintaining your muscle mass, etc. It's
Lifestyle
lifestyle
factors.
factors, right? Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so super interesting. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I think it's kind of been beaten by the media as well, and just interesting stuff.
One thing I didn't pick up from this study, and I don't know if they covered it or not, did they have, or do you remember what they potentially correlated reasoning why around like your 60s, why that drop off would start happening at that
I don't. That's actually
age
really
range?
interesting. Maybe I'd have to go in and like deeper dive into the study because I definitely didn't do that for this one.
Okay.
So the next one is super exciting. So this, you guys have heard Aaron and I talk a lot about training at long muscle lengths, and then we had the data driven guys on, and they talked about training at long muscle lengths. And this all started, this whole idea around training at longer muscle lengths, kind of started with a study in April. Which is crazy that it was April 2021, but there was a study that compared seated leg curls to lying leg curls, and this was very very apparent that the seated leg curl was more effective, and it was that it overloaded the lengthen position more than the lying one, which makes sense. So then since April, there have been 3 studies that have proven the exact same thing as the first study, which is wild that they've even, I don't know if these studies were like in the works prior or like just like people thought that first one was interesting and then they started to replicate like similar ideas. It's just it all happened very fast, but every single one is saying the same thing. So first, a couple months ago, we had Pedrosa et al. With a study that was partial range of motion training elicits favorable improvements in muscular adaptations when carried out at long muscle lengths. And this one compared leg extensions, and we've talked about it on the podcast as well, where it compared different ranges of motion, where one group did just the bottom range of motion, one group did the middle range of motion, and one group did just the top range of motion, but never actually came to the bottom. And they found that the group that did just the bottom range of motion had the best results, which is crazy because you always think about the leg extension being, it's hardest at the contraction point, like that's where it burns, et cetera, et cetera. But it's actually the getting it going at the bottom that makes the most difference, right? So that was about 2 or 3 months ago. Then Sato et al. Did elbow joint angles in elbow flexor unilateral resistance exercise training to determine its effects on muscle strength and thickness of trained and non-trained arms.
Talk about a title.
Yeah, like can't they just make it easier? Like, yo, we tested the biceps at different angles. Um, so what they did here is they compared training again, just like the leg extension one. They compared training at the bottom of a curl versus training at the top. I think it was a preacher curl. So the elbow is already flexed, and you're either training just at the bottom 50 degrees or like the top 50 degrees of the movement. And again, they found that the increase in thickness was significantly greater in the bottom range of motion group. And then prior to that, they're reviewing the study. Okay, so this one was leg curls. It is Maeo et al. And it's an in-subject design for leg curls. So one leg did a seated leg curl, and the other leg did a lying leg curl. And in this one, they discovered that the seated leg curl increased 14.1% versus 9.3% for the lying leg curl. So again, a significant amount. And so now, sorry about the mix up on the studies, guys, but basically what we now have is these 3 studies plus the original study, and I think that it's pretty convincing that training at long muscle lengths is very effective. And to kind of cap that, after the discussion with the data-driven guys, I have made my only bicep movement in my strength cycle the incline dumbbell curl. So again, it's, training at the long muscle length. So, instead of doing a partial range of motion, which is what they kind of did with the elbow flexor study, where they just had you working at the bottom range of motion, because it was a preacher curl, right? They were just working at the bottom range of motion, but by doing an incline curl, you're starting in the stretch position, which puts even more of an effect on that lengthen position. So, anyways, any thoughts on that?
I was just last week reading through a research review roundup, and there was one on I think it was the mouse study. There was one where they with their methods they checked the muscle thickness in like multiple, I don't want to use the term diameters, like multiple portions down the muscle length, as opposed to like previous ones when they compared, they just like chose a site of a muscle. But this one they like took like, I think like through whatever part of the hamstring, like, 5 measurements, because obviously your hamstring's like, 8-10 inches long, depending on how tall you are, type of thing. And that was really, really cool because they found that like there were, I think, oh man, I think the more distal end of the muscle had greater growth than like the proximal end. So it was just a really, really cool that they had taken multiple measurements across the muscle instead of like one kind of cross-sectional area. I can't remember which study it was because I read through like 6 of them on a review last week, but that was really interesting.
Super cool. Yeah.
From a practicality standpoint, I think what it's really interesting here is like, let's say you're someone who's kind of strapped for time with your training. You can now know like what you want to bias with movement selection. So one thing I've been doing is like, depending on the days and my timing, right? Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I've already been at the gym for like an hour and 40 minutes. I am not doing 6 sets of biceps. So what I'll do is like, I'm going to do like 1 to 2 warm-up sets of like a shortened overload bicep, like a cable curl or something like that, just to get them warm. And then I'm going to hammer like 2 really hard sets of a lengthened overload. So like an incline dumbbell curl, or we have the preacher curl machine that I can select where I want to overload it. So I'll just like overload the lengthened and two really hard sets of 8, and like I'm fucking out of here type of deal. So I think that's really cool with that information, is that like it lets you intelligently choose this is going to be the best sort of bang for your buck exercises if you're only doing like 2 sets or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely tells you that there is more stimulus and more fatigue from lengthened movements. So again, you get more bang for your buck. And if you want to manipulate that stimulus to fatigue ratio, you can kind of begin to do that with exercise selection in these different ranges.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I had one more study, which is kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what to think of it, but it's about drop sets versus straight sets. It's by Varovic et al. Drop set training elicits differential increases in non-uniform hypertrophy of the quadriceps in leg extension exercise. So essentially what they did here is they had one leg. Within subject designs are super cool because you're comparing yourself to yourself. So you're already taking out a bunch of variables, right? Which is cool. But they compared one leg that did a straight set. So they would do 70% of 1 RM. I think that was established by a dynamometer thing where you like push against it. So 70% of 1 RM for max reps, basically to failure, was what one leg did. And that was 1 set. And then the other leg did an initial buy-in set of 3 to 7 reps at 90% of 1 RM. And then they did a 20% drop and then a 15% drop. So they had an initial buy-in set plus 2 drop sets, and they counted that as 1 set as well. So ultimately what they ended up finding was that in certain regions of the quadriceps, their growth was similar. Like there wasn't anything significant difference. But in the rectus femoris, in the proximal region, it was 30% and 50% increases for the drop set group. And I literally don't know what to make of this because I don't know why a drop set approach would be more effective for a certain area of the muscle than a straight set approach. And the only thing I can really think of is that the drop set group just did more volume. Like it wasn't a volume equated study because they counted a single set plus 2 drops as 1 set and compared that to 1 straight set and said, that's equal. So I don't exactly know that it tells you much. And again, the implementation of the initial buy-in set being 3 to 7 reps at 90%, it lacks practicality because like who's going to take 90% of their leg extension max and do a single leg extension for at 90%? I mean, it just does, it kind of lacks common sense in actual training application. So I don't know what to think of it, but I think if we're going to take one thing from it, it's just that there are options on the table. Like for hypertrophy, you can train in so many different ways and it's effective. Like if you want to do straight sets, cool. If you want to do drop sets, cool. Like it kind of reiterates prior studies where they compared drop set training to straight set training. I think it was like 3 straight sets was the equivalent of 1 buy-in set plus 4 drops. So you would get like 5 sets if you look at the drop set. And I think they found that those were pretty equivalent. So it's just kind of providing more options of ways that you can implement training effectively.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually want to back up a little bit. I think this was the study where they measured the growth at
I think you're
multiple
right. Yeah.
points of the muscle. Because here it said they had, where was the note around the amount of growth in the proximal region. So I think this was the study. So pretty cool. It, like you said, the design of it, I don't know how much practicality that is. I personally do not like taking leg extensions super, super heavy just because of implications on your joints, right? They just don't feel good to me on my joints. But I think in terms of how, it puts more options on the table for types of hypertrophy training. And especially one thing I guess I would add to this is in my own training and what I recommend with clients and what my coach recommends to me when you have higher cortisol patterns in other parts of your life, it would be beneficial to reduce intensity techniques and physiological stressors in terms of extra training stimulus. So maybe drop sets and intensity techniques would be better, have a better, more practical application in your life when calories are much higher. Maybe you're at, a solid true maintenance or a slight surplus, slight to moderate surplus, and you're sleeping really well and your job is chill and other parts of your life are great. But if you are dieting, stressed out, sleeps poor, just going through a breakup or something like that, probably not the best time to be like stacking a bunch of intensity techniques and drop sets and shit, because you're just going to exponentially increase your physiological stressors.
For sure. Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I mean, yeah, for whatever your situation calls for, like you can maintain hypertrophy. I think that's kind of like the end of the day story is like, no matter what, like as long as you have all your limbs and you can train, you can probably maintain hypertrophy in some way. Cool. So moving on from the research stuff, I have been taking Element, the electrolytes, for a couple months now, and I love them. They're amazing. They taste great. And I have gotten to a point where I am now drinking like 5 packets a day because I just really enjoy them. And so I have some questions just in general about things. And this is also partially because I just listened to, I think it was Stronger by Science was talking about sodium intake recently. And they were talking about how there was a question about whether it has performance enhancing benefits and that powerlifters were, or some people were potentially like dosing sodium at like 10,000 milligrams, like really high amounts. Not at one time, but like I think to keep like levels high. I really can't remember if this was Stronger by Science or not, or where I was listening to this. But anyway, they were talking about how like there isn't like your body will usually figure out a way to get rid of excess sodium. So anyway, I just had some questions on this and I was curious how much sodium you take per day.
So I just looked before we started this, and in my chronometer, just by like my food, I get around 2 grams per day. And then I take basically, so I'm not using Element right now. I'm using something called Relight by Redmond's Real Salt. I saw it in Redmond's as like a salt brand I buy. So I was like, oh, cool, let me try this. It's very similar. It's like a gram of salt or a gram of sodium and stuff like that. So I take 1 scoop of that. So that would put me at like 3 grams. And then I'll add maybe half a gram into my intra workout. I have Gatorade in my intra workout, which maybe has
a gram.
I don't know how much, maybe a gram. I would say I'm probably 5 to 7 grams per day of all things equal, and that's with adding some to my meals and stuff like that.
Cool.
And then I will generally only do about one scoop of like that, relight or like an element per day, maybe two if I go like hiking and do something else or whatever. And I can tell like when you're really in tune with your body and you eat a lot of the same foods and quality foods and stuff, like you can tell when you're dehydrated, how your like lips feel and that sort of thing, when your pee starts changing color. So if that happens, I'll have an additional one, but generally two max.
So I think I'm probably right around the like 7,000-8,000 per day, and that's with the 5 element packs. Um, and it's crazy because one of the things that, so I was also listening to Rob Wolf on Rachel Gregory's podcast the other day. Did you listen to that by chance?
I didn't see that he was on
Yeah,
that.
so he was talking about electrolytes mostly, but but he what was it that he was saying? He was saying that a telltale sign that you're not getting enough sodium is that you cramp, like cramp at all in any way.
Oh yeah.
And I cramp almost every day. Like literally, I cramp probably in my calf or my foot every night while I sleep, probably one time. And it's not like an awful one. Like I stand up and it goes away, but you have to apply pressure in a certain way so it kind of dissipates. So I have to like do that for like 10 seconds and then it goes away. So that probably happens like once a day, and then occasionally I'll have another one just like at random points throughout the day. And I'm already having all this sodium, so it makes me question like, is there like an upper limit here? Like if I'm at 7,000 to 8,000 right now, that seems to be within range of okay. But I don't like sweat a lot. I don't sweat when I train. I don't sweat when I walk. I don't really do cardio. So what do you have any thoughts on that?
It is probably something else. So I agree with what Rob said. Generally, when people are cramping, it's an electrolyte issue. It could be that something else you are doing or something you're taking with them, it's not getting assimilated properly, or it could be injury specific too. For example, it's very very rare I cramp. However, the foot that I had my Achilles surgery on will, like, if I move it in like the right kind of angle, like it cramps. And that can be, and it's like, oh, and that's probably something nerve related or something like that. But it's probably not sodium at that rate. I don't know what like an upper limit would be. I think it would be hard to put a number out there because based on like, again, someone who's sweating a lot, like Bryan, and back when we were doing CrossFit, and working out stupid long, and I mean, I'd say we could probably been taking 12, 14
Dude, and I don't know
grams
if
per
I had
day in
any
those
sodium.
days.
Like I never added salt to anything. I just ate food and like whatever was there, but like I didn't know it or even think about that.
Exactly. So the upper limit can probably be pretty high depending on what your lifestyle looks like. I do know for some people with blood pressure, right? I mean, fortunately, like blood pressure is easy. Like you can get a cuff off of Amazon for like 30-40 bucks, that'll keep your readings, a wireless one. I think it's one of those things, if you're concerned about it, if you don't know what your numbers are, like just run them. But it's very unlikely, if you do have if your blood pressure is already fine, it is very unlikely that salt will move that
Right.
much in either direction.
Yeah.
It's generally when people have already existing lifestyle factors contributing to the elevated blood pressure.
For sure, yeah. Mine's always like 115/75 or something like that. So what is the risk of over diluting, essentially, if you drink a lot of water, but then essentially you need to have more sodium to dilute that water, right? Or to make sure it's not too diluted.
I mean, the risk is death.
Right. Well, yeah. But I guess like for me, like again, I guess more looking at myself and why the question comes to light is one of the things you noted on my blood work months ago before I began my diet. When you looked at my blood work, is you had mentioned that there was that one kind of thing that stood out to you, that maybe my kidney, I think it was my kidneys, weren't getting the sodium or something. Like I didn't show low sodium, but you had a
Like your electrolytes were fine within perfect range on your blood work, but some of the other markers that were off are are all commonly linked to dehydration.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
is what
yeah,
it
yeah,
was.
exactly. So that was when you told me that I should start taking sodium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did, like right at the beginning of the diet. Um, and I still drink a ton of water. So I'm just wondering, like, it's just interesting to me because you drink more water, that then probably means you need more salt, right?
Yeah, because some more will get flushed through the
Right.
process type of deal. Yeah, I mean, I in this is a really good example or scenario to, like, I don't want to use the word treat by any means, but like follow the like the, I don't want to say characteristics, but like what you're presenting it with your body in physiology, as opposed to just like trying to, like, follow what the tests
Mm-hmm.
say. Because like are you thirsty? Are your lips chapped? Are you peeing yellow? Are you, well, besides the cramping might be something you want to chase down, but is there anything else like in your life or lifestyle or training that would lead you to believe that you are dehydrated?
No, I never use lip stuff. Kim's always using it, and I'm like, no, I don't need any. I'm cool. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, it might be one of those things where your body just runs outside the, like, generally acceptable
Mm-hmm.
bounds, right, of physiology. I think that's one thing to really understand, that you may be an outlier in certain things. For example, my blood glucose runs really high. After like a crappy night of sleep, and especially if I'm like stressed with a work thing, like I'll pull pre-diabetic numbers of fasting blood glucose. It's always been that way. It's whether I can eat 1,000 grams of carbs per day or have 40 grams of carbs per day,
Wow.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
budge. So it's one of those things. It's just like learning your body, and then eventually through different education pathways and stuff, understanding why some of these things may be outside that. For you, this might be something, if you're really interested in it, kind of following up with a doctor and being like, hey, I cramp
Mm.
kind of regularly. These are my EGFR values from my kidneys on my recent labs. Here are my sodium. Like, you have a lot of the
Right.
information. I take in 8 grams of sodium per day. Like, what do you
Right.
think? Now, your GP's probably not going to have many answers for you, and
Right.
they're going to just write you a referral to some specialist or something like that, and it might be a dead end. That my
Mm-hmm.
blood glucose stuff was a dead end with my GP.
Okay.
Really didn't know fuck all more than I did, which I kind of knew going into it. But he sent me to an endo, and then eventually the endo was like, yeah, maybe you'll develop type 1 diabetes as an adult, and your pancreas is just gonna shit out. And I was like, oh, sick, thanks, asshole.
Right.
So that was the end of that. But it's one of those things, like, everyone will, or sorry, not will, may exist as like an outlier in certain aspects. But
Interesting.
I would I recommend you continue increasing your sodium intake, at since you're already at like eight
No.
grams per day? Probably not, but it could be like, is it always the same leg? Does it move around? Like, what
No,
else
I mean, it's
goes
pretty
on?
much just a foot or a calf, and it changes.
Is
It.
it
No,
this?
it
It
changes.
changes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it could be something like tissue related, right? When's the last time you like mobilized or got a deep tissue or anything like that
Yeah,
done?
not in my legs in years. I don't let them touch my calves anymore. That shit is so painful.
It really is. Yeah, so it could be something related to that, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then what about potassium? So one of the things Rob Wolf said on that podcast with Rachel was that they use potassium to kill death row inmates, um, because it cramps the heart into failure. Which I feel like I've heard potassium chloride. I believe is the molecule or
The
the
tablets,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
potassium.
I think that makes sense, intuitively, but I didn't know that. And then he was like, yeah, you really don't want to get too much potassium. And so I was like, I wonder if I have 5 elements a day, if I could kill myself, which clearly I can't. But what do you know about potassium?
So the most interesting thing with potassium, right, is generally in like Gatorade, the element, your different electrolyte solutions. It's in a ratio with sodium, where sodium is going to be much higher, and our body has this mechanism called the sodium potassium pump. So on either side of, I believe it's a cellular wall, but I'm not. Don't quote me too specifically there. There needs to be a certain concentration of sodium on one side to potassium on the other. In this mechanism, the sodium potassium pump kind of change the ratio through different mechanisms. Man, I think osmosis might be one, and then whatever the reverse of osmosis is, where it's like the moving from a low concentration to a high concentration with like an active transport mechanism. I'm really stretching
Okay.
my bounds of what I can remember on this, but they do exist in that balance. And then the body's so incredibly intelligent. It will rob and steal to create and maintain that balance type of thing. So I do not know of anyone who's really ever taking like pure potassium type things. There may be some health condition that a doctor might prescribe you something for like a sodium, or sorry, the potassium chloride, right? Is that what it was? The tablets there. But I did a little bit of looking before the episode, but it was like I found like reports like death at like the around 11 to 12 milligrams. But I wouldn't really recommend ever supplementing like straight potassium. Like bananas are a really, really good source for potassium, as are sweet potatoes. And then anything like an electrolyte solution is going to have it in that appropriate ratio to ensure you're probably not going to put yourself in any sort of like health risk type of deal.
Yeah, it looks like in your notes here that you put 12.5 grams is more or less the amount to kill yourself. So I think the 200 milligrams that I get from Element should be just fine.
Yeah, because I think in Element it's got like what 50 or 60 like milligrams of potassium.
Oh, is
for
that what
each.
it is? Okay, then it's 200 milligrams of magnesium, and then it's 60
Okay, yeah.
of potassium. I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
It might be. I can't
Okay.
remember. The only thing I do remember specifically is it's like a gram of sodium.
Yeah,
in
it's a
each
gram.
one.
It's a gram of sodium, and then significantly less magnesium and potassium. You would have to have like 100 elements to kill yourself, so that's good.
Yeah, it would be a really interesting thing to like reach out to Element and be like, what is the tolerable upper limit for how many of these I can drink per day? Because that's the kind of I mean, okay, so let me be clear. There is some element of risk there, but it's one of those things. Like I remember in high school, like I had a friend who would just drink Gatorades, like as like a beverage. And I mean, each, 20-ounce Gatorade's got like 40, 50 grams of carbs in it, and he'd have like 4 or 5 per day. And it's just like straight dextrose, and glucose. So if you're just sitting on the couch, like hanging out, pounding Gatorades, like it's, you can go through 300 grams of carbs just from sitting there drinking it. Like you don't need that. So these drinks that taste really good, there's that kind of, a little bit of a delicate balance of like, should I really just be drinking these all day long? Because don't get me wrong, they're absolutely delicious, but there's like a diminishing returns of utility for that type of deal.
No, for sure. I just like, yeah, I would say 4 is probably my number. 5 on a big day, but there's definitely like one or two around the workout, and then one while I'm going for a walk, and then one pre-dinner. So yeah, probably 4. They're just so enjoyable, and yeah, and I don't know, I guess I tell myself I need the sodium because I'm cramping. So maybe that's not true. Maybe it is true. Who really knows,
Yeah.
Let's see. So do you want to do this last thing? We could probably knock this out in like 5 or 6 minutes. So I had a question on my recent story where a guy asked if my current routine is full body, and if so, why? And it was an interesting question because it is full body, and when I thought about the whys behind it, they're definitely more psychological than they are physiological. And what I mean by that is when I'm doing a strength cycle, I kind of talked about this in the beginning. When I'm doing a strength cycle, there's so much focus and arousal that goes into, being able to brace and set up for like back squats and heavy deadlifts and things like that, that it takes a toll on you psychologically to get up for those lifts. And I kind of feel like I need that day in between where I have none of that, and I can just kind of like regain all of that arousal that I need to be able to come in the next session and do it again, where I don't feel like, kind of like, again, like we talked about earlier with hypertrophy training, you kind of don't even want that arousal. So I sit back and am more of like a type B, just kind of like lay low and like, okay, when it's time to go into the gym, I go into the gym and I do my thing and like I work my muscles, but I don't have to get excited about the sessions as much. So that for me, it's mostly psychological. I think physiologically, there's definitely the aspect of separating out your frequency for each lift. So like if you're going to low bar back squat in a strength phase, you're probably going to want to do that 2 to 3 times a week because strength is a skill and you have to get kind of better at performing this movement. Same with like, you know, hip hinges and deadlifts and stuff like that, but more so with like a back squat. Like a deadlift isn't something you really can do multiple times a week. Like if you have a tough deadlift session, you're probably not deadlifting again till the next week, which is why I have an RDL on one day and a deadlift on the other day. But for back squat, like you can do that multiple times a week. So being able to set up your training in a manner that optimizes your performance on the squat in subsequent sessions is important too. So that doesn't mean that you couldn't do a strength routine that has like a lower, upper type thing and still be recovered for your squats. But then for me personally, that just kind of goes back to the psychological arousal piece. So I prefer, my sessions are long. I would say I spend 2 hours on each of these 3 days doing my strength sessions. But I'd prefer that over 1 hour, 6 days a week in this case. So anyway, I thought it'd be cool to just kind of talk about some of our prior experiences with strength phases throughout our lives and whether they've tended to lean more towards full body or into a split of some sort. And if you have any thoughts or recollections that you want to share.
At this phase, like in my like training career, I don't really know what I would prefer. I generally, I think probably like an upper lower type thing. I don't really love like the full body training because especially, well, here's the thing. If I'm following a program, right, and I have a coach, I'm just going to basically do what they say. If I'm doing it myself, some of that like decision fatigue, I think would kind of get the best of me. And I'd be like, well, how do I choose what doesn't get chosen, right? Type of deal. That's where the full body gets difficult with me because like if I'm doing full body 3 days a week, like how do I know where I cut what I'm doing? Like that training session might turn into 2.5 hours because my chest is kind of fresh and that would be
Well,
hard
you have
for
a
me.
pre-designed program, right? Like I have 5 movements on each day that I do. So clearly you can't hit the whole, but like you can't hit every muscle group in 5 lifts. So
Exactly.
yeah, there are sacrifices to be made for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, I would probably still prefer that upper lower. I agree with what you said. I don't think that I could be deadlifting multiple times per week with squatting at least twice per week. I just don't think there's any way I could. Let's say subjectively I am recovered. I'm using air quotes here. I think I would have a performance decrease, like almost guaranteed type of deal. This one's hard, and I think for me, I don't feel as strongly opinionated because I've never been like a really good strength athlete type thing. I've always been better at hypertrophy. You know, even when I did train for strength, I was never my progress was always kind of slow and very full of like ebbs and flows, hills and valleys type of deal. So it isn't something that I feel like overly opinionated on. Like I mean, let's face it, Brian, you wrote my strength programs for years. You know what I
Well,
mean? And I just followed what you
you
said.
did a lot of strength stuff after you stopped CrossFit. Like after you left the gym, you joined like a strength gym, and you were doing mostly strength work for a year or two, right? Like
Yeah.
even when your Oli work wasn't included, when it was more like powerlifting focus, or was it mostly Oli, or was it a combo of both?
No, it was mostly like powerlifting
Yeah.
or like power
So
building style stuff.
how was your split at that point?
So it was 5 days. It was mostly upper lower. There might be some things that would get kind of like flop. You know, like we might do some like back extensions on like an upper day just to help with, but they'd be like body weight type stuff, right? Just to get some like blood and movement in there type of deal. And then like core stability type stuff might be on lower body. So there was some like blend, but generally it was like 4 or 5 days per week, which I I think with the strength work, I would prefer it to be more days per week than less, just so I could distribute my total like exertion of my energy over more days than less days, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, no, totally. Like that's a completely viable way of doing it. It's just looking at my history, I feel like I've always done strength cycles as full body 3 days a week. And I've just had such success with it. Like every time I've done one, I've been surprised at how effective that was for me, that I find myself struggling to want to veer away from that. So anyway, that's my rationale. How about when you were playing football and you said it was mostly like a strength program that you guys were doing? How many days a week were you training back then?
5 days, except in season, I think we only did like 2 days maybe. But I mean, I don't know how viable or like practical our high school training program was. I mean, we squatted 3 days per week. We had a back squat, which was like a 10 to 2 pyramid. We would front squat on Wednesdays, and then on Fridays we would wide squat.
Okay.
Which was
Sumo.
ridiculous.
Ductors.
But we did dips every single day.
Right, that's crazy. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, and then we would have like a 10 to 2 pyramid like bench on Tuesday, and that's about as far. But it was a lot of volume. I mean, it was 2 hour sessions 5 days per week.
Yeah, cool. Interesting. Well, I think that there's definitely many ways to skin the cat, and if you end up, are you still planning on using the DDSIP? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so I think it's going to honestly come down to my mental bandwidth at that time, because I have to run the weeks. I think I still have at least like probably 5 to 6 weeks on like my gut protocol, and then where I'm at the end of the year. So if I have a little bit of mental bandwidth, it's not getting completely like sucked up from work stuff, I may do the DDSIP because I'm really interested. And if I just need to show up, like I'm just gonna hire, like one of my clients is a super badass powerlifter and coach, so I'm just gonna hire him.
Dope.
And like, dude,
Very cool.
these are my goals.
Yeah.
Just give me something type of deal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, I kind of hope you use the DDSIP just because I want to hear about it and see what the structure of the program looks like.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Like I don't know. It kind of those things like blend my loves of obviously training with like my. I mean, you can't get away from like the nerding tendencies in data and AI type stuff. Yeah. So I do really would like to play with that at some point.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else. I think that was solid.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool episode. Maybe we will do more of these. So if you guys like the kind of research roundup type of episodes, let us know. DM myself or Bryan on Instagram, as we're both most active, or you can comment on YouTube as well. And I will make sure one of us gets back to you. So with that, guys, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.